The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling.
Hello, I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Dudding.
And this is Story by Story.
Sharing the human experience.
And it's also December 2015, and happy holiday.
Indeed, happy holiday, whatever holiday you celebrate.
Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, Christmas.
New Year's?
New Year's. Let's hear it for New Year's. No. At any rate, we're gonna share a little bit of maybe what would say, how do you begin to capture the stories of Christmas?
Or whatever holiday you celebrate.
Because one of the nice things about this time of year is that the human heart, literally for eons, when the days got short and the weather got cold, folks looked inside their homes and their hearts, and they began to think about good things. And we remember the stories that get developed around those good things. And that's what we're gonna talk about, Kate.
Indeed.
Yes. And but meanwhile, we want you to know that we're here on behalf of the Story Circle of the Capital District and Story Circle at Proctor's, which is the resident company of our Story Circle Guild, about 50 storytellers throughout the region who meet regularly, who perform at Proctor's Theater and at other venues throughout the region. And we're here both as educators and, yes, promoters and advocates for storytelling.
Well, I really think of myself as an evangelist for storytelling, but most people take 3 steps backwards when I say that. So advocate is
Well, you know, there's kind of a spiritual spin to the word evangelism, and that's
and it's very apt.
Well,
in my case,
it is in your case in all of the religiosity of it. But when the word was actually brought into the English language from the Greek, evangelos is a messenger. Very simple, a messenger. And the proselytizing connotations of it that happened in the early part of Christendom just labeled it the same way that you have been described as a storytelling evangelist. And I think it's a great title for you.
Yes, because I truly believe that for every big problem in the world, storytelling can help. Storytelling has been used in the reconciliation processes in both Northern Ireland between those 2 groups that had bitter fighting for years, and also in South Africa. Again, very bitter, very heart-wrenching situations that they're trying to come together.
And often the stories that those situations work in, as the situation improves, the stories of celebration, of shared joy and learning and connection, they continue.
Yes, that the stories, you then have stories of being together.
Right.
And when people share their stories, they inevitably find what they have in common. And it's usually a big surprise.
That's right.
But then the warmth spreads and is shared.
And there's joy in that. And,
yes.
And if you think for a minute, I'm talking to the viewers now, you know, the idea of having stories that are important to you, that are your stories, not so much a TV script or something like that, you know, inherently, we do this, particularly now. We'd come together and say, sitting there at Christmas dinner or at New Year's and say, do you remember when we did this in New Year's 2015 or 16 or whatever? And those recollections get remembered. And the people that were in the story get remembered even after they're no longer with us.
My mentor, Elizabeth Ellis, says that's one of the powers of storytelling. You can bring people back to life.
That's right.
And one of the reasons I started telling stories, which I think is going to be a segue into our main topic today, one of the reasons I started telling stories was because my parents died when I was in my 30s. My father died 2 years before my son was born, and my mother died 2 years after he was born. So the only way really he could know his grandparents, my parents, would be from my stories. And so that's one of the driving forces that got me into storytelling.
And it's a strong motivator in terms of wanting to just share the learning. And we don't think about personal stories or family stories as like shared learning. In reality, they are, because you're instilling the culture of your own family or your own group, and they're really strong. Now, one of the things we thought we'd do with you today is kind of introduce a little bit of methodology about how to build a repertoire in your own mind and maybe in your own family about personal stories.
And we don't necessarily mean that we expect you to go up on a stage and share these stories. Really, my biggest hope is that you share your stories within your family. That if there are elders still alive in your family, that this show will inspire you to ask them some questions, gather stories from them. Or if you are the elder in your family, that you will share stories conversationally with the younger members of your family.
Lighten up on that elderly stuff, will you?
Well,
senior,
is senior
okay,
better? Okay. And the stories, well, I can remember my father sharing a story when I was a teenager. The occasion was my mother served boiled potatoes. Now, honestly, my mother knew I didn't like boiled potatoes. Mashed potatoes were good, but just boiled potatoes, why didn't she mash the potatoes? And I voiced this opinion, and my father said, when I was your age, young lady was always
Young lady.
When I was your age, young lady, I was boxing groceries at the A&P after high school. And because I worked there, I was able to bring stale bread home. And my family was happy to have that. Now, I never appreciated that story because because I was clueless as a teenager, number one. And because, two, it was delivered as a lecture, not as a story. But eventually, when I was telling a story about my parents, and I said, and then there was the Depression, and that's, of course, why my father was working and helping to bring home food and enjoying stale bread. I was telling a story to third graders. I said, and then there was the Depression, and there was a sea of blank faces. Oh my goodness, I will never forget that. And I'm desperately thinking, how do you explain the Depression to third graders? So to kill a little time, I said, do any of you know what the Depression was? Not really expecting an answer, not even hoping, but just to give me a little more time. But one little boy raised his hand. I said, yes. He said, wasn't that when everyone was poor? And I said, yes, that's a very good explanation. Thank you. And then this story about my father bringing home food, stale bread came out spontaneously, and the little boy said, gosh, they really were poor. And that was the very first time I really heard the story. I got beyond the lecture. To the story, to the heart of it. And I thought, oh my goodness, my father was responsible for bringing home food for the table. And at 16, I vacuumed and dusted the house on Saturdays, and I think I cleared off the table. I was never responsible for making food. You know, it was like, different way of growing up.
Right.
So these stories, even if you don't get them, your listeners don't get them initially, they're very important.
Yep, and I think the ability to kind of enable a conversation about places and times, invariably, one of my granddaughters was visiting us, and she was about 7 or 8, and she asked, "Well, where did Daddy live?" And I said, "Excuse me? Yeah, where did Daddy live? Where's he from?" And I said, well, he's from here. He's from here? I said, well, but I don't see his room anyplace. I said, well, when your dad and your Uncle Josh, they went to college and they moved away, and the room that you and your mommy and daddy are staying in we kind of redid that room so it doesn't look the way it did when he was a little boy or a teenager, but that's where he grew up. This is where Daddy grew up. Yeah. And in a way, that's the story of place. And, if you're able and if you're blessed by having those questions come up, then you can put them in perspective. And as you were talking, I began to just recall personal stories that bubble up in my head. And you don't know whether you should write them down, whether you should tell somebody, or at my age, whether I have told somebody. But at any rate, talk a little bit about your website, because you've got a little bit of prompts and references for people who might want to do this, explore a little bit more on this method.
On my website, katedudding.com/family_stories.shtml, you see it on the slide on the screen right now, right? Yes. I've gathered, with Janine Laverty's permission, a list of topics about families that came up during one of the many workshops I've taken with her. And so the topics range from pets to punishments to nicknames, and then there are all kinds of holidays and gatherings, cooking disasters. I can remember, it wasn't exactly a cooking disaster, but it happened in the kitchen. And we were getting ready to go to piano lessons. It was Friday afternoon. My brother and I were home from school. We were getting some soda to drink, and then we were going to rush into the car. My mother was going to drive us to the next town for our piano lessons. And when she was opening a bottle of Coke, yes, this was bottles, not cans, a bottle of Coke, it slipped and it spilled all over the table and the kitchen floor. And my mother sort of looked at us, and we looked back as innocent as we could, because we were not at all responsible, though usually we were responsible for such spills. And it was the summer, and so sticky Coke, my mother hated ants, knew that this would draw the ants. And she didn't usually blow up, but on these occasions she might. But she held it in. She knew she couldn't blame us for this, and she didn't. And she cleaned it up. And then we went, very quietly, we all got in the car and went to the piano lessons. So that's really about the only time I can remember my mother actually being really mad and then having to stifle it.
Wow.
She didn't often get mad.
Well, let's...
There's another time my brother and I were fooling around in a bank, and she was so furious with us, she walked out without us, and we went, what?
There's folks out there watching on TV who have run a list more than 2 of times their mother got angry with them and lost them.
Yes,
So
yes.
I got a feeling.
Yes. So she was a wonderful woman. She was encouraging. So these couple of episodes where she was not her normal loving mother really stand out in my mind.
Now, I'm just going to make a pitch for the coming holidays. You're going to be getting together with friends and family, and the prompts on the website from a learned storyteller are available, and maybe you have an opportunity here to kind of suggest or think through some stories that you think your kids or grandkids or the folks at Bridge Club might be interested in, just to hear about something relevant in your family. And sometimes they become part of your own traditions again. And I think it's important to think about tradition in what families and organizations create, because you create tradition. And there's that great line from Fiddler on the Roof, tradition. Again, the meaning of that word is rooted in the Old Latin. I don't know where that etymology is coming from, but what it means is literally to hand over. So if you want to hand over something to the next generation, to your grandkids, then there's an opportunity with the stories there. And you know, after that conversation about Daddy's room, she asked about Daddy's room. Now, I didn't have a picture, but the quick story of Daddy's room is that he had a paper route, and at the age of 14, we asked him to clean up his room, and he said he wasn't going to. And to put leverage on the situation, we said, no allowance until you clean up your room. Bingo. He didn't clean up his room for 4 years. He lived off the paper route, and he went to France as an exchange student after high school, and my wife and I had to clean up that blessed bedroom. And didn't I tell that story to his daughter so she would know about the way to deal with her dad when the admonition came, you got to clean up your room. She's 13, so that whole tension is just starting to build in that family.
Now, I sidestepped that issue. I said, you don't want to clean up your room? Fine, just keep the door closed. I don't want to see it.
No.
And it worked for me. My husband had a harder time dealing with that, but I said, this is not a big thing to fight over. Let's let this one go.
So one of the prompts, if you really want to harvest some stories, talk about cleaning up your room.
Yes, or punishments. That falls into punishment. That I don't think was terribly effective. No allowance.
No.
Did you notice?
No, notice how that didn't work. Yeah.
Or you might ask one of your senior relatives if you remember a lecture that they told you. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can, now that you're an adult, you could bring it up and say, what was that story again about when you were, or when this happened? You know, I'd like to hear that again and listen to it with fresh ears. Hopefully with some sort of recording device going. Just to have it. Just to archive it, because I have been tempted, I can't tell you how many times, to call Clearwater 98556. But I know if someone answers that phone, they won't be my parents.
Right.
Yeah. If I had I do have some videos of my mom.
And you know, the memory test of if you can remember the phone numbers of your home house when you were a kid and your first phone when you were, strenuous. So I'm not going to show you that I really can't do the second one.
Just telephones. We're not old enough, are we, Joe, to have actually used a crank phone?
I didn't actually use a crank phone, but our first phone in the village of Nassau, when I was old enough to be aware of a phone, was a party line.
Right, my grandparents had a party line.
And actually, it was a party line, and you had to get the operator to get you connected.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and
Now, my grandmother was that kind of telephone operator before she was married. So 1912, 1913
Yeah.
for the village of Seymour, Connecticut. That's how like a
Switchboard, yeah.
switchboard.
Yeah.
If any of you know what a switchboard is, I've operated one on occasion.
anyways, it's just one of those little topics.
So, do you have a personal story, Joe?
Well, I do, because one of the things about this particular season is that I think that stories just bubble up at this time of year. And this is one that actually happened to me in my role as a consultant. Before I was a storyteller, or before I realized I was really a storyteller, I was a healthcare consultant, and I did a lot of things for community health centers and governmental agencies and stuff. And I had just finished an assignment in downtown Washington on the 22nd of December. And it had gone well. I'd helped people work out a strategic plan on a fairly complicated issue, and it was going to have to continue, so there was more work coming in the new year. But right then, I had my little roller bag, and I was headed out of town, and I was coming home for Christmas. And I walked down the street to the Metro Center, and I got in, and I took the yellow line on the Metro, which eventually goes, without switching a train, right to National Airport. And I'd had all this pressure of the meeting and talking and stuff, and I got on that train, and I just sat down, and I sighed, and I stretched out my legs a little, and I shut my eyes, and I began to dream of home for Christmas. And all of a sudden I heard, "Nice socks." And I looked up, and there was a rather handsome guy in a camel hair top coat and a three-piece suit. And I said, well, thank you. Those are my Merry Christmas socks. And it had Bullwinkle and Moose and, antlers with lights on it. And I said, my sister gave them to me for Christmas a couple years ago. I try to wear them every year at this time. And I'm just sitting here humming Christmas carols under my breath because I'm going home for Christmas. You mean like this? The first Noel, the angels did say, was to certain poor shepherds in fields where they lay, in fields where they lay keeping their sheep, on a cold winter's night that was so deep. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Well, me, being a little shy and retiring, I had sung along with my new friend, and I'd also started to conduct, just like I did for you. And I looked and smiled at people, and there's something about singing a Christmas carol. You can't sing it by yourself. People join in. And not only did the people immediately around us join in, but the whole car was singing that song at the end of it. It was just delightful. And my handsome friend in the three-piece suit, the sound of the first Noel hadn't left the car before he starts. It came upon the midnight clear, that glorious song of old, with angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men, from heaven's all gracious King. The world in solemn splendor lay, to hear the angels sing. Well, we all got into that too. And then my friend turned to me and smiled. The car stopped, the doors opened. He said, "Merry Christmas," and he got out of the car. I turned back, I looked at the people in the car, and they looked at me like, okay, do something. So I thought for a minute, and I said, well, I could sing maybe, but, you know, I'm more of a storyteller. So I have a little short story for you. Joseph and Mary were going down to Bethlehem, don't you know? And they're on this, Mary's riding the donkey, and it's dusty, and she's tired, and Joseph is leading the donkey, and he's tired and dusty, and the donkey's tired and dusty. And she says to Joseph, she says, Joseph, Joseph, tell me one more time, why are we going all the way to Bethlehem to have this baby? And Joseph says, that's the only place the HMO is going to cover the delivery. Oh, well, actually, some of the people did laugh in the car. Now, all this time, when this had been all going on, there was one guy right across from me who just sat there. And he was kind of maybe not aware of it. Or maybe he was just mad. I don't know. But right after that half laughter, he looks at me and said, what was that stop? And I said, well, I think that was Pentagon City. Oh, I wanted to get off at Pentagon City. Well, I'm sorry, you know, you can just get off and get back. Oh, you and your songs and your jokes. Why? Oh, you just made me miss my stop. And he was bustling and fussing, and everybody, you know, he kind of killed the atmosphere, to be quite honest. And the car stops, and it's Crystal City, so he can get off and just take one quick stop back. And as he turns at the door, he looks around, breaks into a smile, and says, oh, and by the way, Merry Christmas. So we said, Merry Christmas. And the bubble up had even touched the angry man on the metro. Now, right after that stop, the train comes out of underground and pops up, and there's the airport. So I was just excited that he had kind of cheered himself up. So I started dashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh, o'er the fields we go, laughing all the way. Bells on bobtail ring, making spirit bright. What fun it is to ride and sing a sleigh song tonight. Oh, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Well, everybody joined in with really great enthusiasm, and we pulled into the national airport stop, and I got my little wheelie bag, and I turned and I said, Merry Christmas. And a couple people went, Merry Christmas, and they started, and I got out, I said, what was that all about? I mean, I was the choral director of the Yellow Line here for 10 minutes, and I don't get but a little, but as I was watching the train go, I noticed that a guy 2 seats up from me was going, and I heard, oh, come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant, come. And that sound, that Christmas carol, was soon out of my active hearing, but still in my heart. You see, when the community gets going, it can continue on its own. You can get new leaders. The story can carry on and continue on the way while you, as early vocalists, might go on to other matters of heart. And so I turned with my wheelie bag, got my boarding pass, got on the plane, and went home for Christmas.
Thank you, Joe. Now, you know, it reminded me of a flash mob, but it was even better than a flash mob because you got the people there to join in.
I think that the important thing is that I can't get over how impressive looking this young guy in the top coat and the three-piece suit was, and what a good voice he had. And the minute he started to sing, you know, something was going to happen. It was that kind of voice and that kind of thing. And I just happened to be the fingers sitting down. And it took me a while to get over the dismount from the train until
the Grinch got a bigger.
The Grinch got a bigger one. But there was hesitation over somebody picking it up. And in the psychology of that, there had to be another person brave enough to sing out loud. And so that, as I've told the story, I kind of say that the real moral of that story is whatever happened after I got out of the car. And I'll never know, but I have a suspicion of what went on. And the other things about stories that are kind of fun is that actually happened. But on the other hand, I could have made up part of the ending. Whoa, she's looking at me. Oh, no, I didn't. It was the only thing that I switched from the reality of the story was that the Grinch remained the Grinch. And I made him not the Grinch because it's so much better to have him be converted by the evangelist than to remain a Grinch.
Okay, well, that's
So there you go. So I've confessed all my storytelling art right here for you guys, and I appreciate you watching, and we appreciate you supporting storytelling and showing an interest. And there are some things coming up in the new year, which
in December.
In December.
Well,
yeah.
and it continues on in the
Right.
new year. But the first one is, oh my goodness, on December 1st. And because the first Tuesday, Tales and stuff happen always on the first Tuesday.
The first Tuesday.
Which happens to be December 1st. And it's Joe Doolittle. Do I know who that is?
Well, we do. And it's going to be a little bit of this theme carried out in a wonderful, charming atmosphere of Arthur's Market in Schenectady Stockade. And there's wonderful food there. I've got some friends coming who are musicians, so there'll be some songs. So if you have a favorite story of Christmas you'd like to share, read, a favorite poem, please join us.
Christmas or any
holiday.
Any holiday at all.
And we've had a good season of programs there, and it's just a great, relaxing time. People who have been there speak well of it.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's a wonderful spot.
Right.
And it's really in a little village.
That's right. The village. Well, it's the old dorp, as they say.
Right,
in Dutch.
and it's a charming spot. The food is good. Come early. There's only one cook, so it's not McDonald's, but the food is better than McDonald's.
Better than McDonald's, and it's got a strong vegetarian flair. So.
Right. So then on December 6th, Sunday, December 6th, in Scotia, is it?
In Scotia, the Trinity Presbyterian Church is out on Hetcheltown Road, near the Schenectady Airport.
What was the corner of Swaggertown and Baldwin?
Swaggertown and Baldwin Road, right. I'm sorry. But Tim Combs, Reverend Tim Combs, is the minister there, and he's an active member of the Society of Biblical Storytellers. And he also has a memory like a steel trap. And I once heard him give the book of Mark. He had memorized the whole gospel. But what he has done is he has become Charles Dickens, and it's just a wonderful rendition of the Christmas Carol, and that has so many wonderful lines and circumstances in it that it may be the ultimate family story of the holidays. So it's great. If you're in that area, I encourage you to attend.
And actually, part of my holiday tradition is to watch the Muppets version of A Christmas Carol. A truly diverse cast of people and Muppets. Michael Caine and Kermit and Miss Piggy and all the other ones.
Well, I can dare say that's not. There won't be any Muppets at Trinity Presbyterian.
Right.
But I agree with you that just an adaptation. It's a great story.
And that was the first time I saw Kermit dancing.
Oh.
Because I remember Kermit sat on a wall.
Right.
And his legs just kind of hung over. And you couldn't quite see the wires that were moving his arms. And Jim Henson's hand was Kermit's head, and that shape was Jim Henson's hand. But in this movie, Kermit's dancing. by the magic of...
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? And I said to my son, who was probably 6 at the time, and we're in the movie theater, look, Kermit's dancing. And he went, so... oh, well,
All right.
I digress.
I
digress. Then we have, on the second Wednesday of the month, a storytelling open mic up in Saratoga. We alternate between Woodlawn Commons, which is part of the Wesley community, and Cafe Lena. So when we're at Woodlawn Commons, which is, we're in the Harkness building, which is behind hospice. You can go to our website and get complete directions.
And it's a great time at either of the open mics. Wonderful tellers, and particularly when we're at Wesley, you get a whole range of older people, but it builds the audience, and they're appreciative, and there's a just different aspect of community there, which is just very refreshing.
And one of our dear friends lives there, Betty McCanty,
who's been a guest on this show.
Who's been a guest on this show. And it's always delightful to hear her tell again, as well as the other tellers up there. Then we have our monthly Story Circle meeting. Sometimes we meet here at the Colonie Public Town Library, but other times we meet in Albany. And on December 16th, we'll be meeting at the Pine Hills branch of Albany Public Library.
And those are opportunities to come and listen, or if you want to try out a story in a friendly, safe environment, we encourage new folks to show up and listen and tell. So by all means, put that on your calendar if you're interested in learning more about how to tell a story.
Now, another member of Story Circle is Janet Carter. She lives in Saugerties, and she runs storytelling there the third Friday of the month at the Inquiring Minds bookstore. So that would be a wonderful place to do if you're on the southern end of our listening, or you just want to take a little trip down. Saugerties isn't that far away.
And it's a charming little village with a couple of nice restaurants and a good bookstore.
Right, and a good bookstore. Also, we'd like to mention that we are on YouTube. We have joined the 21st century, and using mostly stories cut out of these TV shows, we have now a collection of over 150 stories worth watching, stories on demand. Just go to our website, storycircle@proctors.org, and click on YouTube.
Well, that's a pretty full calendar for a busy month. Well done, Story Circle.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Now, Kate, do you have an example of kind of a personal or a family story or something you could share?
Well,
because it's kind of in the season to share things like that.
It's in the season. I have a story. It's a true story that comes from this area. I learned about it initially from articles in the Times-Union, which is just next door to us here. And it's a personal story, but it's not my personal story. I call this the story of one American soldier. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. That is the oath that every U.S. Army soldier swears when they are enlisted. This is the story of one of those American soldiers. Not too long ago, in 1990, this American soldier and his family came to this country. He was only 8. When he was 16, 8 years later, he and his family went to a government building near Newburgh, New York, with a lot of other people. And they solemnly swore this oath: I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen. That I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. That I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by law. That I will perform non-combatant service in the armed forces of the United States when required by law. That I will perform work of national importance under civilian direction when required by law. And that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God. Then they sang the Star-Spangled Banner, pledged allegiance to the flag, and proudly became naturalized American citizens. A few years later, when this young man graduated from high school, he said to his family, I want to join the Army. I have special skills that Native-born Americans do not have. Skills that the Army needs. But instead he went to college, as his father wanted him to. Then, that horrific day, September 11th, 2001, happened. His sister later said, 9/11 made up his mind for him. He enlisted in the Army Reserve just 4 days after that happened. His unit was called up to serve as part of the invasion force into Iraq in 2003. While he was serving over there, he kept on getting comments from his fellow soldiers like, "What kind of last name is that?" Or, "Are you sure you're serving in the right army?" When he told his brother and sister about this over the phone, they said, "Is it worth it, putting up with all that mouth?" But he just said, "This is the only way I have to show how much I love this country." After 4 months of serving in Iraq, this American soldier, Mohsen Nakhvi, got leave. And he came home secretly, just in time to celebrate the end of Ramadan. Now, Muslim families gather together to celebrate the end of Ramadan, the way other families gather together to celebrate Christmas or Passover. And you know how that goes. If a family member can't be there, they're called on the telephone. That's all his family expected, to be able to talk to him on the phone. But instead, he showed up. I think you can imagine their surprise and their sheer joy when he walked in the door. His father said, "This is the best holiday I've ever had." While home during that leave, Mohsen spoke to a reporter. He said, "It was pretty scary over there. My unit was under heavy mortar fire, so I had to sleep in my combat gear. But I knew that people in this community were praying for me." Maybe you've done that too. Prayed for someone in your community whom you may not even know personally, but prayed for their safety when they're in danger. And then he added, "You know, it's pretty hard getting used to running water again." Mohsen's family and friends said over and over again, Mohsen can make a joke about anything, even the worst situation. He's always the life of the party. When his leave was over, he went back to Iraq and served a total of 9 months there. Then he came home and finished his college degree. When he graduated from college, he signed up for the Army, the active service, once again reciting that oath. He told his family, "The Army is going to be my career. The only way I'm going to get out of the Army is if they throw me out, which isn't going to happen, or if I retire." In June of 2008, when he was 26, Mohsen married a young woman named Raazia in a mosque in Colonie, New York, where she lived. That's a town right next to the town where I live. People said afterwards, Mohsen and Raazia were so happy that day. They were smiling and laughing the entire time. A few days later, as had been scheduled earlier, Mohsen and his unit were deployed to Afghanistan. There he was going to use his special skills. As a native of Pakistan, he spoke Urdu, and as a Muslim, he spoke Arabic. And he could speak to the Afghans in those languages to reassure them about America's intentions in that country. Unfortunately, 3 months later, on September 17th, 2008, First Lieutenant Mohsen Nakhvi was killed by a roadside bomb. 3 other American soldiers were killed with him. Sergeant Joseph W. Harris, 21, of Romeoville, Illinois. Captain Bruce E. Hayes, 42, of Cheyenne, Wyoming. And Staff Sergeant Jason A. Vasquez, 24, of Chicago, Illinois. They were among the 155 U.S. soldiers who were killed in Afghanistan that year. Mohsen was buried with full military honors after a solemn service from that mosque where he had been married just 3 months earlier. After the 3 rifle volleys and the playing of taps, the flag covering his coffin was ceremoniously folded and presented to his 20-year-old widow, Raazia. Brigadier General William Phillips then presented Raazia with Mohsen's Purple Heart, his Bronze Star, his Combat Infantry Badge, and his dog tags. Brigadier General Phillips said, "Mohsen served his army with great distinction. He is a true patriot." Mohsen's father said, "We are patriotic Americans. We are proud to be Americans, but still people do not trust us. Why? Why is that? Why are we Muslims blamed for what 19 people did? Why? Why is that? My son was a patriotic American. He did his best, and now he's lying there under tons of dirt. What more can you ask from a patriotic American?" Mohsen's 18-year-old brother said, "Mohsen told me that he had to stay in the army because that was the only way he had as a Muslim to show how much he loved this country. I don't know anyone who loved this country more than Mohsen. Mohsen is my hero. I look up to him, and I hope everyone can do the same." The story of one American soldier, First Lieutenant Mohsen Nakhvi.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kate. And so his in-laws are in the region, and his folks are still in Newburgh. Oh.
I believe so.
Oh, man.
His brother graduated from University at Albany.
No.
Every once in a while I do a Google search, and I saw that he had done an honors paper on terrorists.
No.
Still trying to distinguish between Muslims and terrorists.
Now, I'm curious. The story attracted you from the newspapers.
Right. Actually, there was a video of his father saying what his father said.
So that spoke to you.
That's what drew me in. And then I Googled some more, and I found newspaper articles about when he was on his leave. And then after his death, other newspaper articles, both here and down in the Newburgh area.
Interesting. Just a great story. And I'm also curious, have you met any of the family?
No, I haven't.
No.
That I believe I could get in contact with them. I sort of don't want to intrude on their privacy.
Well, appreciate that. And I have to say, have you told that story in any of your performances for
Yes,
people?
I have. I'm working on a series of stories for my next CD, which will be called Muslim Stories Long, Long Ago and Now.
Ooh.
And this is one of the stories near the end. I've done that performance twice. Once for a class for Academy for Lifelong Learning. They were reading a book set in Afghanistan, a book about Muslims there. And I was asked to come and tell stories as part of that program of reading that book. That's what sort of got me started. And though I already had this story that I had worked up, and I didn't know quite when to tell it. But then this gave me a framework. And then I told it at part of the Academy for Lifelong Learning's winter storytelling series. It might have been just this January, or 2015, or the previous one. And in both cases, it was very well received. And people said, please tell that story to others. Please share that. It's a vision, or it's an image of Muslims that we don't normally get in the news here. And I found lots of other stories now to round out this program.
Right.
That there was a story just this summer. There was horrible flooding in Houston. And a woman who lived near the highway that was flooding looked out and saw there was a car stuck in the water. So she went out, and the water was like up to her knees, and she said, you need to come out. We can't tell how high the water's going to come. Come to my house, and you'll be safe there. And if the floods take your car, well, we don't want you to be in it when that happens. And she got them back to her house and gave them some towels. And then there was another car that was stalled out there, and she went back out, and the water was higher. It was up to her hips. And again, she urged these people to get out of their car, come to her house. And she went a third time out, and then it was up to her waist. And again, urging people back. And when she got them back, she got them dried off. She lent them clothes. She let them call for people to pick them up. She's a Muslim. Her last name is Mohammed. I'm sorry I don't remember her first name off the top of my head. But she said, I'm not a hero. I just did what needed to be done. And that's what I've found with the Muslims I've met through the Interfaith Story Circle of the Tri-City area. They're very kind and reserved, quiet people. but service is part of their
Right.
religion.
And for those of you who aren't familiar, our Story Circle has a companion called the Interfaith Story Circle of the Capital District. And if you Google that, you'll find another whole array of storytelling
And-
resources. And
In fact, right now, due to the magic of television, you will see a slide on your screen giving the web address, interfaithstory.org/Tri-City.
right.
And that will explain about the organization and its two programs, the Story Circle that meets monthly, and Children at the Well, Youth Storytellers for Peace and Understanding.
And we've had some of the youth storytellers guests, and the videos from their performances here is on that web page, as well as it's on our web page. And the point we're making that this companion story circle group is really building bridges between the various faith communities in our hometown, just by being each one of them being themselves in a common community, woven together by story. And it's a pretty good group of folks, if I do say so myself.
They just had their 10th anniversary of a special program the Story Circle has of Under the Tent of Abraham. Abraham is an important figure in not only the Jewish religion and the Christian religion, but also in the Muslim tradition. And so 10 years that fact has been celebrated by the Interfaith Story Circle of the Tri-City area. And Gert Johnson started this story circle over 20 years ago because she had a strong belief that has been proven out again and again. When people of faith share their stories of faith, they find out how much they have in common. And the differences are respected. But they find how much they have in common. It's truly remarkable. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. It's wonderful.
I have one thing that I thought I might do toward the end of the program.
And we're in 2 minutes of the end.
One of the classic holiday programs is the Christmas Carol. And if you remember the story, Scrooge, this ultimate character of non-Christmas, through really having to look at his own gravestone finally to see how he would turn out if he had remained like the Grinch on the train, comes up and says, wow, I just got to do Christmas differently. And he wakes up from his dream and he thinks he's missed Christmas. And he runs to the window and he throws open the window and he says, whoa, young man, what day is it? And they say, Christmas Day, sir. He says, is the goose still in the window at the butcher shop around the corner? Yes, sir. There's not money to buy it in this neighborhood. He says, well, here's some. Go buy it and bring it to the Cratchit house. And I will remember to keep Christmas in my heart all the year and never forget the lessons that it teaches.
Thank you, Joe. And we hope that all of you keep your holidays in your hearts throughout the whole year. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you come back again.
Happy holidays.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons